Now please welcome Brent Crite, the Dean of the Daniels College of Business.
Good evening, welcome. It is a delight to have you all here. Thank you for taking the time out of your evening to be with us on this really special occasion. We are going to give John Hayes, the Chairman, President, and CEO of Ball Corporation, a much more appropriate introduction. But I want to acknowledge one thing that I referred to in our video a little bit earlier about the fact that the Daniels experience at its best is one that is co-created. It is co-created with extraordinary faculty and stakeholders, alumni, students, university administration, and perhaps most critically, our corporate partners that are in many ways inextricably linked with the experience here at Daniels. As we like to do in the final Voices of Experience session for an academic year, as is tonight's, we want to take a few minutes and recognize our corporate partners who have made this extraordinary event possible. And so I'm going to ask 4 of our students and our corporate partners to join me on stage. I think we have 3 of the 4 that we're recognizing tonight. I think CoBank didn't have anybody that was available. We want to recognize them anyway. For those of you on Twitter, I think you saw the hashtag is DanielsVOE. And I'd like to ask Rob Roybal, a Daniels MBA student, to acknowledge our first sponsor.
Thank you very much, Dean. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Rob Roybal, and I am a proud native of Denver, Colorado, and currently a full-time MBA candidate here at the Daniels College of Business. I'm also the Vice President-elect of the Military and Veteran Student Affairs within the Graduate Business Student Association. And tonight, it is my pleasure to thank the sponsors of the Voices of Experience Speaker Series. I would like to start by thanking our in-kind sponsors, the Denver Metro Chamber of Commerce, the Mile High Society for Human Resource Management, and our Daniels student group, Net Impact. Now, if you would please help me to recognize the organizations who make Voices of Experience possible. Without their contribution, programs like this would not be here for us to enjoy. It is my honor to recognize Mr. Patrick Cowan from U.S. Bank.
Hello, my name is Amy Snyder. I'm from Granbury, Texas, and I expect to graduate this June with a master's in global finance, trade, and economic integration with concentrations in finance and international business. I'm also an acting student ambassador for Corbell. I'd like to take this opportunity to give our thanks to Ms. Lori Davis from Grant Thornton.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Seals. I'm from Aurora, Colorado. I'll be graduating from my MBA this summer of 2016. I'm also a campus ambassador for the Daniels Fund. Unfortunately, CoBank is able to be here today, but I'd like to thank them for all their support. Thank you.
My name is Jillian Stafford. I'm in the full-time MBA program at Daniels, class of 2017, and I'm the incoming president of the Women in Business Club. I would like to thank Ms. Barbara Kreisman of Daniels Executive and Professional Programs. Thank you again for your generous donations to the Voices of Experience program. It is with great pleasure that I introduce to you John Hayes, Chairman, President, and CEO of the Ball Corporation. Mr. Hayes joined Ball Corporation in 1999 as Senior Director of Business Development and Planning. In 2000, he became the Vice President of Corporate Planning and Development, and then the Vice President of Corporate Strategy, Marketing, and Planning in 2003. From 2005 to 2008, he served in leadership roles for Ball Packaging Europe, first as Executive Vice President and then as President. In 2008, he returned to the United States as Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer. Mr. Hayes serves as the Chairman of the Board at Ball Corporation and also on the board of Leeds School of Business at the University of Colorado Boulder, as well on the Alumni Council for Colgate University. He's also a member of the Business Roundtable, where he is the chairman of its Corporate Governance Committee. He also serves a variety of nonprofit organizations that benefit under-resourced students and others in need in the Colorado area, as well as promotes the sport of hockey. We're going to start this evening with a short video introducing Ball Corporation.
What drives me, it's the same thing that drives Ball. It's about doing things right. It's about focusing on the customer. It's about focusing on the people. It's about the attention to detail. And at the same time, it's such a can-do attitude and can-do spirit that it's just a lot of fun. And when you get in a room with a bunch of people that are trying to solve problems and they're trying to do better, it rubs off on you. And it just creates an energy that steamrolls. And it's just fun to be a part of it.
Ball is a good company to work for. It's good for the people, the environment, and does a good business. The very nice part is that we always look very far ahead. What is good for the company now and what's good for the company in the future.
If everybody's acting as if they have some kind of ownership in what they're doing and how they're doing things, I mean, there's really no limits to what we can, what Ball can do.
And I think one of the most attractive things about Ball is that you're constantly in a team environment. So nobody does one thing in isolation. It's that same type of feeling. We're a large company, but it's still intimate. There's accessibility to everybody in this company.
I want to be the best in everything we do.
We do amazing work, but also the company really values the employees and wants to invest in you. And so whether that's training opportunities or giving you opportunities to travel for the company and represent them, I think it's really a great place to learn.
We have a long-standing history of treating employees with respect and valuing our employees. I see time and time again that the company puts people over the bottom line, and we really try to take care of our people here. The difference between Ball and our competitors that I see is that we really strive for excellence and we really go after the details. It's a wonderful environment. It's basically like a playground for engineers.
E seus colegas de trabalho, eles acabam se tornando uma extensão da tua família, dos teus amigos. Então o ambiente que a Lata Pac Ball ela proporciona pra gente é esse ambiente familiar, esse ambiente amistoso.
People who work here are giving people. It feels like a family company where you know the people you work with and you have relationships with them and you have fun doing this really big, important work.
Findlay had the 100-year flood. It was pretty bad. Come to find out that the whole plant had put money in and they divided it up among the 6, 7 employees that lost everything. And that was pretty awesome.
It's all about having the right people on the right place, doing the right things, and enable people, develop people for this. It's all about people. People is the soul of Ball.
And what makes Ball even better is it really cares about its employees. It wants its employees to do well. It cares about its families and its communities. You don't find that in many places today.
Culture exists, companies exist, institutions exist because the human spirit wants to feel a part of something bigger than just themselves. The legacy is to make this a better place.
Please welcome John Hayes.
Let me start off by saying no PET bottles. You got to be an ambassador for your product here. So. Good. Well, wow. Thank you for coming. This is, when I was asked to first speak, I had no idea what I was getting myself into, and I'm looking around, and this is just spectacular. I really appreciate that. Jillian, thank you for the very kind introduction. You know, it really is a privilege being here tonight, and more importantly, it's a true honor and privilege to be in front of you at the Daniels School as well as the University of Denver. Thanks, Dean Kreit, wherever he may be, for the very leadership that he's provided. You know, I hope you enjoyed that video. In fact, thank you very much. I'm finished. I don't need to say anymore. They said it for me. But it is a great little plug for Ball Corporation. And every time I watch this, and that was made a few years ago, it really does. It brings a tear to my eye. It reminds me, honestly, why I'm one of the luckiest people in the world. You know, how I stumbled upon Ball at a time that truly I was searching for meaning, searching for a purpose in life, searching how I fit into the world. And I was looking for a group of people that I could share a common set of values with. I'm going to talk more about that later. But suffice to say that, you know, when you hear about Ball and you think about Ball and you hear about those folks at Ball, they talk about a lot of things, but what you heard is about family. You heard about can-do. And you heard about having a higher sense of purpose than just making profits or making profits. And at Ball, those aren't just words. We've been around 135 years, and that's part of our DNA. It's part of our fabric, and indeed, it's part of who we are. Here at the University of Denver and the Daniels School, you guys have a great thing going here. The Voices of Experience series, for all you students out there, take full advantage of it. You know, it's such a great venue to give you all context, to understand how you apply what you learn in the classroom into everyday life, and about what's really important in life, various things to contemplate and things to process. So let me get started here, and I'm going to start off with a little bit of story that helps create this bridge between the University of Denver and my talk about pivot points and the importance of value-based leadership. Some of you might know I'm a Colgate University graduate, go Raiders, and well, I'll get into that a little bit later on, but this Saturday night, I was at a Colgate alumni event, and your chancellor, who happens to be the former president of Colgate University, Rebecca Chop, was there. And both of us had the chance to say a few words, and you at the University of Denver would be proud of her and representing you as her chancellor, because in just a couple of minutes when she was speaking, she framed the world we live in terms of higher education, you know, how the millennials are fundamentally reshaping higher ed from curriculum to skills to course loads, course management, and even graduation requirements. And as she was speaking, I was having a pivot point, what I call, and let me tell you why. Several weeks ago, I was up at Colgate. My daughter's a freshman there, and they were having what they called E-Weekend. It's Entrepreneurial Weekend, and they were honoring and educating those that went into the entrepreneurial world. And they had a panel with recent alums discussing their own journeys. And a young woman who had started this company a couple of years ago, she happened to be from Boulder, Colorado, of all places, and she had started her own company. It was some lifestyle brand. That's not really important to the story, but something that she said really triggered me. And when talking about entrepreneurship and her own experiences, she said, and I wrote this down literally, that, quote, "We are the first generation to think about purpose." Really? Then I don't know, I'm doing something wrong here, and I think the folks at Ball Corporation must be doing something wrong. Because at Ball Corporation, purpose is not a buzzword or a placard on the wall. In fact, we don't even use the word purpose. You know, it's not a way to sell more products or make more profit, as I said, but it's rather a part of who we are. You know, when you think of Ball Corporation, you think of Muncie, Indiana. You know Ball State University? Yeah, that was the university that was nearly bankrupt, and the Ball family bought it out in order to provide a commuter school for students in the state of Indiana. You know, yep, that's that same Ball that I work for today. You know, it's the one that's been around for 135 years, been in 46 different businesses, and to this day provides health care and pensions and a long-tenured ability to stay with the company forever. That's the same Ball Corporation I work for today. You know, that just 2 weeks ago, we had a food can drive. Originally, its origins was it started 3 years ago as a friendly competitions between two departments in the corporate office. And in 1 week's time, we raised over 950,000 meals for the communities in which we work and operate in. So when you talk about we're the first generation to think about purpose, I still scratch my head, but I digress here. And obviously, it does trigger me a bit when people shroud themselves in some feel-good term and without living the values in order to just sell a little bit more product or make a little bit more profit. So the reason why Chancellor Chop's talk was a pivot point for me and the story about we're the first generation to think about purpose, that's the last time I'll say that, it was gnawing at me, and I didn't know why. And I didn't know why until it hit me yesterday as I was preparing for this. You know, Dean Cright asked me to discuss my journey, my experiences, and how values led me in a certain direction. You know, I believe in loving what you do. I believe in working harder than the next person. I believe in putting the we above the me. I believe in being true to yourself and knowing who you are. And I truly believe in giving back more than you receive. You know, however, that story reminds me all about the me over we, the taking before giving, the perception of who you are versus who others think you are. You know, while I respect that person's point of view, what she was saying violated my own belief system. You know, leadership is not about the smartest person in the room, but it's rather standing for something far larger than oneself. It's about creating an environment where others not only get on board, but jump on board to help create a mosaic of achievement, to help fill out that giant jigsaw puzzle we call business and we call life, to get others to go where they wouldn't go on their own. So how does this all relate to what I'm yapping about now? You're going to hear a story of one person's journey, my journey, to find out who I was and who I am. You know, now, so before I do that, let me dive in and talk a little bit about myself, which is never comfortable. And any one of you who have seen yourself on video, it's never comfortable. But I was born in a middle-class family in an upper-middle-class neighborhood in Chicago. I grew up very independently. I came from a broken family, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. I was extremely fortunate to be accepted by Colgate University, which taught me the value of intense personal relationships, and more importantly, about being part of a community. At Colgate, I did reasonably well academically. I played varsity sports. I was involved in the community. And then as I was becoming a senior, I started to focus on what am I going to be when I grow up. I always had a belief that I wanted to go on Wall Street. And this was the fall of 1987. Most of you who were around at that time remember the big stock market crash. And there weren't too many Wall Street firms hiring at that point in time. So I ended up at a small consulting firm that worked with investment banks, and I thought, perfect. I'm going to be able to get a touch from the outside looking in at Wall Street, and I know I want to go back to business school, so I'll have another kick at that can, so to speak, and have the ability to take another bite at the apple and get back on Wall Street. And there's few times in life that you plan on doing something and it actually happens. That was one of them. I spent 3 years at this small consulting firm. I went to the Kellogg Graduate School of Management at Northwestern, met my wife, and then upon graduation landed on Wall Street in the Mergers and Acquisitions department at Lehman Brothers. Sounds perfect, huh? What you're going to hear from me, though, is since that time, I've strived to find who I am. And you're going to hear something very eerily similar to the words and belief you heard on the video a few minutes ago. And that's why I am the luckiest person in the world. Because on my journey, I found what I was looking for. That doesn't mean my value system is right for everyone, and it doesn't mean I'm done with my journey. But I'm fortunate to find Ball Corporation, and I'm very fortunate to be in a wonderful spot. So if you take away one thing from this random walk that I'm talking about, please take away this. You're going to find yourself in situations and points of inflection. I call them pivot points, where one needs a filter, a set of values by which to pivot left or pivot right. You're going to need a system by which to process, prioritize, and evaluate, to dig deeply, introspectively, and find out who you are and what your value system is. And that's the most important thing I learned on my journey in life. You know, not just what others think of you, but what really motivates you and what's important to you. So by understanding this very early in your careers, it will help you immeasurably. So let me get started. First, find your passion and love what you do. You know, we spend more waking hours at work than anything else we do in life. And I'm absolutely amazed how many people go through life not loving what they do. They go through the motions, but they really don't have their hearts into it. You know, how can you be good at something if you don't love it? Yeah, you can be good at it for a while, and yes, you can find some success, but you're never going to be good or, more importantly, happy in the long run. So let me tell you a little bit more about myself. I mentioned going to Kellogg. You know, I was fortunate to get my dream job on Wall Street. I'd majored in finance and strategy, and this was truly a dream come true. You know, I was on my game, and I was ready to change the world. I was ready to make tons of money and to be, quote, successful. Well, over the next several years, I threw my heart into it. I worked my tail off, and I actually did well, but I wasn't happy, and I didn't realize it at the time. It took a very bad accident. I was involved in a jet ski accident during the 4th of July in 1997, and I had complete facial reconstruction and spent 2 months in the hospital and recuperating at home. And now this was the time before the internet. You know, you have 2 months by yourself, one of your eyes is swollen shut and you can't read, and you have 2 months by yourself, you have a lot of time to be thinking. And that's exactly what I did. And when I went through this metamorphosis, I realized that I just wasn't happy. I had a 6-month-old daughter I never saw. I was working 100 hours a week, and I just wasn't having fun. I remember thinking every morning, waking up, when's my next vacation? And that was a very important pivot point for me. You know, I realized that I was in my dream job in investment banking, but I didn't really love being an investment banker. You know, what I realized I loved in the mergers and acquisitions world was not about numbers or not about deal structuring or negotiation. You know, that's part of it, but it really isn't. What I really loved about it was the people, evaluating people, who you can believe and who you can't, who you can trust and who you can't, who can get things done and who can't. You know, I realized in that hospital that I really did love being a student of, I'll call it human nature, the reading of people, the understanding of people, the motivating of people, and the rewarding of people. You know, it snuck up on me during that time I was out, but it was in front of me the whole time. And, you know, reflecting back, it was a seminal moment in my life. It was one of these pivot points that forced me to think about my value system. And, you know what, I'll never forget that moment. So my point is, find your passion. Some of you may have it already, which is awesome. Some of you may not. Don't worry. But don't ever give up looking. Life is too short not to find your passion. Number 2, fall in love with hard work. You know, I was not the most gifted person. Others were more intelligent. Others were more athletic. Others were more engaging. But I learned early on, when candidly I was struggling in high school, that no one will bail you out except yourself. No one will create the opportunities except yourself. And none of that happens without hard work. You know, I've never met a successful person that didn't love what they do and work at it. You know, go ask Peyton Manning how many weeks he took off in the off season. Go ask Governor Hickenlooper how many vacations he's had in the last 6 years. You know, when you love what you do, though, it's not work. Unfortunately, we live in a world of entitlements where hard work is not appreciated by the masses. Where's my cheese? You know, why do I have to put in the hard work? Why can't I live the life that others do? You know, Thomas Edison once said that opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. Bill Gates would have bought into that. You know, he was the one that was sneaking into his high school computer lab in the middle of the night to learn code. You think about Steve Jobs, who lived in a garage next to the solder gun and electronic parts. So my point is this: do yourself a favor. Fall in love with hard work. There is no substitute for it, and there are no shortcuts around it. Number 3, put the team before yourself. You know, I mentioned earlier that I was a part of a family that really wasn't a family. You know, my siblings had problems, my parents had problems, I had problems. You know, I was always a good student growing up, and I'll never forget the time in sophomore year in high school, and I was failing 2 classes. I'd gotten straight A's and B's in my whole life, and I was failing 2 classes. You know, and I was completely lost. I was rudderless. And my friends, my high school hockey team is really what saved me. And today, it is they who I give great credit for making me who I am. You know, when I was more concerned with how the world was treating me and my lot in life, they taught me about teamwork. They taught me about selflessness. They talked about perseverance, and they taught me about accountability. You know, putting the team first and sacrificing, as I said before, the me for the we. You know, I'll never forget one of the games that I was playing, and I think my sophomore or junior year, and I was a young punk, and the captain called me out between periods, and you know, you're letting the team down, and he said it in front of everyone. And I'll be the first to admit it hurt. He did it behind closed doors. And after the game, he came up one-on-one to see how I was doing. He said, nothing personal, but you were letting the team down. And to this day, I'm very appreciative of that person because he taught me the importance of holding oneself accountable to a team. You know, it may not surprise you, but I followed this leader, this selfless leader, and a teammate who actually went to Colgate 2 years before I did. You know, it's people like this that taught me about teamwork, and this is the one value that I hold more dear than most. You know, team first, individual second, because the team and not the individual is the ultimate champion. Number 4, character is everything. You know, our world today is characterized by the total mistrust on so many different levels of so many different things, of business, of politics. I could go on and on. You know, greedy pigs, selfish capitalists who enrich themselves on the back of the masses. You know, some of this is true, but some of it isn't. You know, unfortunately, the road is littered with the names and reputations of people and companies who thought they were entitled above others, that they mattered more than others. And what I'm here to tell you is that ethics and humility and values do matter. You know, in fact, I applaud the Daniels School for this emphasis on ethics and values above many of the other tangible skills that can be taught. You know, values matter more than anything because if you don't trust someone, how are you going to believe them? How are you going to follow them? And how are they going to lead you? You know, several years ago, Ball had a management conference, and Harold Sohn, who's since retired, was the head of corporate affairs, and I always called him the sage of Ball. He told a story. And it was about an architect who designed, you know, the Brooklyn Bridge and built the Golden Gate Bridge. He won every award possible in terms of the design and construction of the world's bridges. And one day he found himself on the front page of the paper, giving a bribe, being caught giving a bribe. And he was at dinner one night, and a waiter came up to him and said, aren't you the one on the front page of the paper? He said, you know, damn it, I spent 30 years sweating blood to become the best bridge builder in the world. I've won awards, I've won accolades. I give one lousy bribe, and you think anyone remembers me as a bridge builder? It's a real important lesson right there. It's not just what others think of you, but who you are as a person and what your value system stands for. I've never forgotten that story. You know, it does remind me of another quick story in my own life that out of college, I mentioned I went to this small consulting firm. It was called Greenwich Associates, and this is a story of Sam, and literally that's his name. He was a 55, I'll never forget this, 55-year-old head of the mailroom in a 100-person shop. And he grew up in the Depression, very humble background, and a delightful person, and he just wanted to be respected. And this is the time in the late 80s when the world was going casual, as I am tonight, but he never took off his tie. He wore it proudly every day, and I always wondered why. So one day I went up to him and said, you know, Sam, why do you always wear a tie? We're going casual. And he said, you know what he told me? He said he grew up in a world where his father told him success meant to get a job where you wore a tie to work every day. He came obviously from very humble grounds, and prior to this job, he had actually been a school janitor, and this is the first job he had where he can wear a tie. And no one was going to take that tie away from him. And that was important to him. It was who he was. And so I've never forgotten that story as well. You know, finally, we live in a world where, I talked before, a lot of it's about the I, a lot of it's about the me. What's in it for me? What do I get? You know, whatever happened to what can we do to help? You know, studies have shown, and many of you are probably familiar with this, that the more you give in the communities in which you live and work, the healthier you are. The less overweight you are, the lower your blood pressure is, the less prone you are to heart attacks and strokes. And equally importantly, you're more happy. And when you're more happy, you feel better about yourself. And when you feel better about yourself, you work harder. And when you work harder, you find your passion more often. And so there's a lot of truth to this, and I'll never forget that as well. You know, I do know that as stewards of this place we call Earth, we are born on it, and we're going to pass away on it. And it depends on what you do in between. And so it's very important that we are net givers to the world in which we live. And I'm damn proud to work for a company who understands this. It's better to be a giver than a taker. It's not only the right thing to do, but it's also good for business. People connect to it. People want to be a part of something far bigger than just some company making satellites or some company making cans. You know, they want to make the world a better place. And we at Ball are blessed to do it with a group of people, 15,000 people right now, who believe in the same. It's quite special. So you see, life is indeed all about the journey. You know, did I envision 15 or 20 years ago when I moved to Colorado that I'd be standing up in front of you, giving you a discussion on values? I didn't. Back in graduate school, I'll give you an example. My wife and I were friends at the time, and we hung out with a group of people. And of course, living on credit cards, and we had a rule that if you received a job offer, you had to take everyone else out for dinner. And so you tried to find that sweet spot with getting job offers, but not too many job offers. And but after the interview, she always asked me about what was the culture like? What did you like the culture? And I was like, culture, schmulture. You know, show me the money. I'm going to Wall Street. And 20 years later, she was right. She was right. You know, it is all about the culture. It's all about who you are as a value in a value system, where you fit in, what you stand for, and what others stand for, and how you fit in with them. You know, one thing I wish I'd known way back then was the importance of being conscious, as I said before, conscious about this. It was unconscious to me as I went through, and how I could use these pivot points, looking back, how I could use these pivot points to help shape and accelerate my development. You know, I can tell more stories about how these values have been useful, and I know we're going to get to the Q&A, so I'm happy to talk a little bit further. But I do know that when faced with decisions, I rely on these values to help shape my actions, and it's made me who I am today. So just in closing, and before the dean comes up, life is about attitude. And you all, the students at Daniels, you guys have a world of opportunity in front of you. You know, what I just humbly ask you is find your passion. Fall in love with hard work and focus on the team. And if you do those three things, you're going to find success. But if you add on to that, focusing on who you are in your value system and being a giver rather than a taker, you're also going to find happiness. So I want to thank you all for allowing me to be a part of this great series. And I only wish you the best as life marches on. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much for that. It was pretty inspiring, and I think for those of us who had the chance to spend a few minutes with you earlier, you know, it's not really a surprise. One of the things that was clear when you're talking to the audience and earlier is that at Ball Corporation, as a result of its legacy and certainly under your leadership, one of the firm's enduring areas of comparative advantage is its culture.
Absolutely.
You talked about that a lot, and yet you've also grown pretty significantly through acquisition. And you talked earlier about a screening process to mitigate risks associated with bringing on new organizations, but give us a sense of what your post-integration strategy looks like to ensure that the dominant culture from Ball is actually inculcated throughout an expanding organization.
That's kind of a loaded question. Well, you know, I mentioned that Ball's been around 135 years. I mentioned 46 different businesses. A lot of those are through acquisition. You know, being a reformed banker, I can talk about this, but, you know, 90% of acquisitions fail, not because of the strategy, not because of, you know, the plans. It fails because the C side, the culture side, the people side, you don't seem to get that right. You know, one of our acquisition screens, as we were talking about before, is indeed about culture. You know, we have turned down acquisitions because the culture was not right. And when you know that things work or fail based upon the people and your ability to empower them and engage them, that's a powerful screen that one uses. And so we use that an awful lot. So getting to your question about post-acquisition, we're actually, touch wood, I shouldn't say this out loud, we're a couple months away from the biggest acquisition in our history. And I can tell you that 90% of what the senior management at Ball is focusing on is just that. You know, we often talk about at our company, our strategy, we call it the Drive for 10 vision. I won't go into it, but the first thing we talk about is who we are, because that's the value system. And it was is the same 135 years ago as it is today. It was founded by Ball brothers that had a very innate sense of family, and we try and perpetuate that today. And so yes, do we have work streams about synergies and work streams about this and that? Yeah, but the biggest work stream we have going on is making sure we have the engagement of the people, because once you get that right, then our jobs are easy. You just stand back.
So I think most of us in this room would appreciate what sort of economic due diligence looks like. Mm-hmm. But when you're doing essentially due diligence on culture, give us a sense of what that looks like. How do you go in? What's the framework that you use? How are you able to sort of, extrapolate?
I wish I could tell you there's a playbook about it, and there's not. You know, it's human beings are pretty intelligent, intuitive people. And you can smell a rat most places. And so what we do, we immerse the acquisition target, in this case, with Ball people. And then we get in rooms afterwards, said, what do you think, what do you feel? Because it is an intuitive thing when you're looking at these types of things. And over time, you can start to see people's behaviors, how they react to certain situations. And too often, and I saw it in my prior life, you get people that are so focused on the business, so focused on the customers in an acquisition process and what products are selling to which customer and where the cross-selling opportunities, et cetera, and they forget about who's doing it all. And so we spend a lot of our time focusing on who's doing it all. Now, I don't want to hide from the fact that we're a for-profit enterprise and we need to make the appropriate returns. Sure. But it's the people that are making the returns. And if you get those inputs right, getting the people focused on the outputs, the financial returns, et cetera, they'll take care of themselves.
Let me ask a question related to the financial returns. You all have recently committed to 10 to 15% growth in EPS. Mm-hmm. Several years ago, you were recognized at being pretty average, that's probably put it politely, with regard to environmental stewardship and commitment. That reputation has changed rather significantly over the last few years. Give us a sense of how you migrate that space where you have a real commitment to environmental responsibility while still having the obligation to create shareholder economic value creation.
Yeah, I think it's an ecosystem that all fits together. We do at Ball. You know, we actually, for 100 plus years, we were environmentally sustainable. We just didn't use that term. You know what it costs about reducing energy because it saves you money? We did that all the time. And so about 5 years ago, 6 years ago or so, we really took a different approach to it. You know, this so-called triple bottom line that starts with economic sustainability. You cannot be sustainable unless you're economically sustainable, because the markets will force you out and you will be bankrupt. That's a cornerstone of it. But what's another cornerstone of it is social sustainability. You have to be good stewards in the communities in which you live and operate. And that's why when I talked about whether it's food can drives, whether it's about, it's amazing. We had, I forget the exact number now, but I think here in Broomfield, Colorado alone, 20,000 man hours of charitable giving of their time, of our folks giving their time in 2015. You do that and there's a business purpose before it, because it creates a connectivity that people can rally around. And it's also a good recruiting tool. And then you layer on top of that of the environmental sustainability where you were going, which is being good stewards for the communities from an environmental perspective. All three of those coexist together, and you can't think of one isolated from the other two. They all relate to one another. So if you're saving energy, it's good economically, but it's also good for the communities in which you live because there's less pollution. And so we look at it in a much more holistic way. We have a vision at some point in time. We have a sustainability report. In fact, ours is coming out shortly. It's been a little bit delayed because of this acquisition. We have a vision that someday that's going to be our annual report. Because when you think about if you're socially sustainable, environmentally sustainable, and economically sustainable, isn't that what stakeholders want? And so we're on this journey, and as we move forward on this, but we're trying to think of it in a much more holistic way than we had in the past.
Sure. So, I mean, that's a pretty forward-thinking, progressive, that's a long-term view. And, yet analyst calls are short-term requirements. And I'm just wondering if you hear from shareholders who say, look, this corporate responsibility, social responsibility, that is merely a tax on the firm. Mm-hmm. And how do you respond to that?
Well, the shareholders, the investment community is, booked in from, you got activists that say, right. Show me the money tomorrow. Right. And then you have people that are on the very other side of the spectrum. One of the things we learned through this journey in terms of our sustainability is we were able to tap into a whole new group of investors that social sustainability was just as important. And so we try not to cater to one group or the other. We try and do what's right. It's very humbling to be a part of a company that was founded by a family and owned by a family for over 100 years. Not one family member is involved in Ball Corporation today, the Ball family, but we all treat ourselves as a family. And I say that because when you're a family, you think about each other and you think long term. We don't run our business on a quarterly basis. And do you get criticism from time to time? Yeah, you do. But you know what? That's our job, to be able to say, we've got a higher purpose than just making numbers on a quarterly basis. And we have our compensations that are tied to long-term value creation like that. Right. And most importantly, though, we have great alignment. We've got a board of directors that's completely aligned with the folks at the company, and it's a lot of fun to see.
Let me ask you about that. You're the chairman of the board, president, and chief executive officer. Can you give us a little bit more technicolor into the structure and the role of governance?
Yeah, it's by the way, my business card is a 3x5 card, I think. It is, and you raise a larger question because it's far beyond Ball. I think it has to do with public company, I'll say America, but even public company in the world. And what is the role of the board versus the role of management versus the role of the shareholder? Right. It's the board's, at the end of the day, the board's role is to oversee, not do, but oversee the strategic development and the succession planning of the CEO. I mean, as its most narrowly defined definition, that's what the board needs to be focused on. Yes, there's a lot of compliance. Yes, there's a lot of oversight. That's part and parcel of overseeing the strategic development of the company, because it gets to enterprise risk and what could knock the company sideways, and that's where compliance comes in. The management is supposed to develop the strategy and execute the strategy. What's most interesting in today's world is what's the role of the shareholder, and it's very clear where the accountability lies in those two things. From a management perspective, you're not executing on your strategy well, you'll know that pretty quickly. From a board perspective, if you're not overseeing that development and focusing on succession, you'll hear that too. But the shareholders, and many shareholders out there, many of the invested capital is out there, is long-term capital. But there's a lot of short-term money these days, right. And they can get in and out of companies like that, but yet create ultimate havoc. Ultimate havoc that are not in the long-term interest of not only the stakeholders, but the shareholders in particular. And it's going to be interesting to see how this evolves over time in terms of the accountability to the shareholder, or of the shareholder, to the long-term development of the company. Right. I know it's a little, I got on my soapbox.
No, I appreciate that. Governance is absolutely critical and probably doesn't get its due. Let me ask you, so Ball Corporation, 10% of your business is aerospace. Mm-hmm. I would imagine that the order of magnitude of complexity and regulation and compliance issues is dramatically increased in that line of business. And give us a sense of how you all as an organization and how your leadership team thinks about risk mitigation and risk management, and how do you balance that between 90% of your business being sort of in one pretty separate sector for 10% that probably has more risk associated with it?
Well, let me start off by saying Ball Aerospace is part of our portfolio, makes us a better company. That part of our business, we're lucky if we're making 5 or 6 satellites a year. we make a couple 100 million cans a day. You want to talk about you want to talk about liberal arts education? That's a liberal arts education right there. And but it makes us a better company because we have people who spend 15 years of their lives on one program that gets launched in that 14th year. Touch wood, we've never had a failure. What happens if that fails? They've just put their blood and sweat in for 14 years, and it might all be for naught. And so I say that because it is a totally different business with its own attendant set of issues. I think to your question about enterprise risk management, I could make an argument that our packaging side of the business has as much enterprise risk because it's more, it's more of the profit pool within Ball Corporation than the others. They are two totally different businesses. You know, it's a lot of fun where I sit because it's kind of sitting on top of both of those. And when you think about our business, we touch the consumer. You know, we sell these to Coke and Pepsi and Anheuser-Busch, et cetera, Miller Coors. We are one of the largest commodity users. We use tremendous amount of aluminum and tin plate steel. And then we also see the government. And so when you think about those three intersections of those circles, that's effectively the economy. So it gives us a really interesting entree into the risk management. And what I worry about today is this overregulation. In our aerospace business, just to give you context, you know, the federal government oversees the accounting in our aerospace business. Don't hold me to these numbers, but 6 or 7 years ago, I think we had 6 full-time government regulators in our building. Now we have something like 36.
Wow.
Business isn't 6 times the size. You know? And so you see this oversight in many different places, and it just worries me as someone in business and actually as a citizen as well, where this is all is going, because you can't regulate everything.
Right. So that's a critical point. You know, if we were talking to financial service organizations, they would obviously mention Frank Dodd, they'd mention SOX, they'd mention probably Basel III capital requirements. For Ball Corporation, are there particular sets of recent regulations that we probably don't know about that, or just sort of the creep?
Yeah, just the creep.
Right.
It's just the creep. The oversight, you know, Sarbanes-Oxley had a big impact on what we do. Even Dodd-Frank, just to give you a sense in Dodd-Frank, which was the big financial institution overhaul after the crisis in 2008, there's a provision in there that we have to audit the origins of every commodity that we use. So now imagine you're buying aluminum off the London Metal Exchange and you're buying it from Alcoa. We have to audit Alcoa, who has to audit upstream their supplier and upstream their supplier. And to what end? I'm still not sure.
Yeah,
That's a good example.
But what end would they say thereafter?
They're
supply chain, child labor?
All of the above, but they're noble ends. But let's fit the means to get the ends, and not just the means for purpose of their own. You know, it is one of the issues we face today in government. You know, the good people aren't running for government anymore. Maybe that's a way. And there's a lot of great people in government. Don't get me wrong. But you know, it used to be our country was founded that you were a successful business person or an academic who actually served in the government. Now many times it's a full-time profession. And so you have people creating these rules that really don't have the context, and it does create issues at times.
As much as I like to, I'm going to refrain from following up on that last point of yours.
I thought I was pretty good balancing it.
I suspect. Look, I really appreciated the quotes that you had up there, and I think it was by Harriet Tubman, a hero of mine. I suspect a hero of mine, and lots of folks in this room talked about that. You know, having a dream starts with the dreamer, and I've always thought that places like DU, where we are in fact, you know, the keeper of the hopes and aspirations and dreams of our students, that this is really a launch pad where they can flourish. And I'd like you to just sort of give us some perspective, those of us who have committed ourselves to education, to developing young human capital. And what is it that a great, I mean, this is a uniquely great place with a wonderful liberal arts tradition and these amazing professional schools. Give us a sense, if you can, about what the opportunities are that exist for a place like DU to really provide the kind of transformative educational experience that it sounds like you know, you would look to support at a place like Ball?
Yeah, well, that's a very loaded question. I give the University of Denver huge kudos for being progressive and being forward-looking. I think higher education is at a crossroads, at a pivot point today now, because the cost is creating a haves versus have-nots in education, and our government doesn't have the resources to support what historically they had in the public education system. DU is no different in that context, but DU is forward-looking and thinking ahead about what does the future for tomorrow need in terms of curriculum. We were talking earlier tonight, why a 4-year education? Who said 4 years? What if you can do it in 3? What if it's necessarily requires to take 5? It's thinking outside the box and not having a prescriptive way of thinking about going into a situation. And that's where I think DU has separated itself relative to its other institutions and other peers. And it's kind of neat. The other thing I'd say is, and again, I've lived in Colorado for 18 years, and so I've been able to see it from afar. I've really had no affiliation with the University of Denver, but it's really neat how the University of Denver over time, and this is a great example, look at this and what we're doing tonight, how they engage with the communities in which we live and operate. I know a number of people, probably some of you in the audience right here, I saw over the weekend at this event, and they were saying, yeah, I go to DU all the time, whether it's for the arts, whether it's for the athletics, whether it's for voices and experience, and not a lot of higher education institutions do that. And so I think the forward-looking perspective of the university, as well as the engagement within the communities that DU is a part of, that separates it.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. I want to ask you one more question, and we want to open it up to some questions from our audience. You talked a lot and really eloquently about leadership and the style that you think is required, and you mentioned the lack of it in our sort of political environment today. As you sort of survey global institutional leadership, and I'm talking primarily in our private enterprises, give us a sense of where you think there's sort of greatest divergence between what organizations need and the traits and characteristics and attributes you see from today's leaders.
So a great story. This evening we were up at a reception and we were talking about millennials. And what I said, I struggle because it doesn't really fit into the millennial mold. And we were talking, and one of the people that were serving drinks up there came up to me afterwards and kind of pulled my elbow and said, "Let me give you my 2 cents about millennials." He said, "Don't blame the millennials, blame the companies. They don't provide full-time employment anymore. It's always part-time employment. They don't provide health care. They don't provide a safety net in terms of pensions and other things." And you know what? That person was right. It's always a shared responsibility and shared accountability about that. So I say that because one of the things that I think originally drew me to Ball Corporation, and I still love today, is that there's this mission about, and a fundamental belief that the human spirit wants to be part of something bigger than just itself. And they want to be able to connect in some way. And, it doesn't matter if you're 20 years old, 50 years old, 70 years old. We're humans, and we want to connect in some way, shape, or form. And I say this only because it astounds me how many companies don't truly get that. They view people as either a number or an employee. And that's why this whole thing about the family at Ball is so important to us, because we may not be of the same blood, but we are the same blood. And so many companies out there don't take advantage of that and don't really try and create an environment where people are inspired and want to be a part of that. And I do think that's one of the challenges in today's world with the millennial generation, where they have 3 or 4 different jobs and they go hopping, and people perceive it's all about me or all about I. Well, maybe we ought to look ourselves in the mirror and say, what are the institutions that are employing these people? What kind of behaviors are we creating?
All right. I'm just still really impressed by the fact that an organization as large as Ball can still have such a high context cultural environment in which you can really get a sense of the shared value. I think that's really a testament to not only its legacy, but to your leadership. And this has been a real treat for me. And And we're going to ask our audience members if they have some questions before we wrap this up. And Lori's got a mic down there, so if there's somebody that wants to ask a question, just right over here.
John, I want to acknowledge the quotes that you used. A lot of them were historical, and that really speaks to your culture and what you built at Ball. How do you commit to 10 to 15% business growth in a really traditional business environment where you hold on to those traditional values? How do you really encourage innovation?
That's well, I have many different levels. Again, there's no one stock answer to anything, but we work in businesses that are fundamentally GDP growth type businesses. And you don't get 10 to 15% earnings per share growth from that. But we use employer financial our financial policies in terms of, I'll put my finance hat on for a minute. Someone once said, and it's true, we don't make cans, we don't make satellites, we make money. Those are just the conduits by which we do it. And so it's what you do with that money, being this long-term steward that I was talking about before, that helps generate the long-term earnings per share growth. But the other thing that's real important, and I truly believe this, it's as much about empowering the people to allow that. People talk about innovation, and that's a nice buzzword, but one of the things that really has separated Ball from our peers and other people is we really do empower our people to make decisions. We're a decentralized organization. We push decision making as low as possible, and it's real simple because that's where the best information is, and that's where the feet on the street are. And when you're able to empower those people that are in a place that they can see something that's very different than sitting in some fancy office in Westminster, Colorado, or Broomfield, Colorado, you get better outcomes. So GDP business times empowering the people, times generating the profits and cash flow and redeploying those in ways that make economic sense. That's how we get to 10 to 15% earnings per share growth. Good question.
Hi, John. Doug McNeil from Laridan. You were talking about a family environment. I'm interested in how you hire. What are the question sets that you use in order for you to assess a candidate for higher leadership responsibilities?
Yeah, now I see some of our HR people here, and so they're going to shoot me when I say this. We have, like everyone else, we have our interview list of questions and all those things. The very first question I always ask and oh, by the way, by the time it gets to me, I've realized the decision's already been made, so I don't get to help in that. But the very first thing I ask people is, what gets them out of bed each morning? What do you love to do? And, again, it gets back to this finding your passion. If someone were to say, I love reading Shakespeare, that's as good of an answer as I love making satellites. You know why? Because we're not going to be working 100% of our time, and we need to find opportunities where people can actually find their own passion. It may be in work, it may not be in work, and that's okay. And so I often focus on the soft side of it. Yes, we can talk about competencies, and yes, we can talk about skill sets. The one thing I've realized at Ball, though, there's 2 or 3 things that again, I know that all of us would agree to at Ball, that in an interview process, there's different ways of getting in it, but these are the things that really matter. It's number one, and you heard it before, it's number one on if you are empowered to get everyone around you to be more successful, you're going to be successful at Ball. It's the humility side of it, and it's the can-do side of it. If you can demonstrate all 3 of those things, chances are you're going to be pretty successful at Ball. And if you only have one of those, it probably isn't the right fit. And there's nothing wrong with that. You just need to say it is what it is. And so at least that's what I look at. I'm looking at our HR people.
HR team. Right here in front.
Trouble finding workforce here in Colorado?
Are we having trouble finding workforce in Colorado? It's interesting. In pockets, yes. In pockets, not so much. One of the we have very low turnover at Ball, which is both a blessing and a curse. But the blessing is when we don't have that many requirements. But when we go outside, in our aerospace business, it's increasingly becoming more difficult to find PhD and other equivalents with engineering degrees because they want to go in the Silicon Valley or they want to go in the high-tech world. And aerospace
at times can be viewed by others as yesterday's industry, where I think it's really neat that, we make things that discover stars and discover solar systems. That's pretty neat. But, to a person coming out of an engineering school, mechanical, electrical, it doesn't matter what, sometimes we compete with that. And, as you should think in the state of Colorado, think about all the high tech that's been coming in here. Google's hiring hundreds, if not thousands, in the Boulder County, where almost 2,000 of our aerospace employees work. That kind of keeps me up awake at night. But again, one of the things that we try and do is differentiate ourselves. If people want to go and, roll the dice for somewhere where they're just a number, that's all right. But we provide something else, and we provide long-term stability, and we provide a home for you. And that's the way we view it.
Well, we'd love to have your HR folks spend a little bit more time here on DU's campus to meet some of those needs, so we can have the conversation afterwards. Yeah. There's a question up.
Hi, thanks so much. So that kind of overlapped a little bit with my question. We talked about hiring and what your questions are, but I'm hoping you can give an actionable tip for other CEOs that are trying to recruit, that high-driven, passionate, entrepreneurial, younger talent. What's one tip you'd leave for a younger CEO?
We can't give away secret sauce. No, it's interesting. Hopefully you've seen this. In the little time I've been up here, I'm a product of a liberal arts education. And I truly believe in critical thinking. I truly believe that, yes, you may not know accounting, but you can teach someone accounting. What you can't teach people in a short period of time is how to think critically and how to evaluate and how to write. That is an unnourished skill in today's world, how to write eloquently and persuasively. And so, those are some of those skills. I talked about skills and competencies that we also measure as well. It depends completely upon what the job that you're looking for and how you screen and evaluate for those things. But the one thing I will tell you, you get bright people around you, and it makes your job that much easier. You get bright people who can think critically, who can play in a team environment, and can bring the diverse thoughts of everyone together in a way that they wouldn't be able to do on their own. Those skill sets are cherished. And when you can find people that have that skill set, grab onto them all day long. Doesn't matter what job they're in, you'll find the right spot for them. Mm-hmm.
Wait, I got the mic. Thank you. Hi, I'm Sue Arspon. I've been one of your consultants over the years, and I've followed you closely. You've gone through many iterations and changes. So could you give us some insight how you take your people with little turnover and help them adapt to the new changes?
It's not easy. It's not easy. Again, there's many fundamental beliefs. Another one about the human spirit, it's resistant to change. It really is. You think about all of us. Another skill set I look for is people that are thrive in change, because that's a great thing. But when you have a company that, candidly, we've been very successful for many, many years, and then you have to bring forth the voice of change because the world around us is changing, that's not easy. I wish I had a stock answer, and I don't. I think I'm sorry?
How much do you get to participate?
How much do I get to participate in the... Oh, well, I guess I'm supposed to be the biggest cheerleader of it. And so, my job is as much about inspiring people and getting people to believe in what we're trying to do. And as part of that, I think it's really painting that mosaic I was talking about earlier, because in the absence of it, if you work in finance or HR or innovation or manufacturing or sales, it doesn't matter. Many times that you have that view of the function you work in, and you're not able to see this. And so my job is as much, and this is again where the liberal arts education comes in, my job is to articulate that broader view and be able to connect disparate things and fit it into that jigsaw puzzle. But I'll be the first, change is not easy. It's not easy. And when you're trying to get a battleship to move in a harbor, it's one of my deficiencies. I'm not the most patient person in the world, and I've learned a lot of patience and humility, a lot more than I ever thought I had in this role, and I think that's part of it as well.
We have time for one more question.
I've got one.
Hi, John. My name's Oric Nepomuceno. I'm in cohort 65 in the EMBA program. Actually, my cohort is going to be leaving in 2 weeks to go to Myanmar and Hong Kong, and we get the opportunity to visit the Ball plant there. So wondering how Ball goes about finding contextual intelligence before going into a country to really kind of get to know why you want to do business there.
You know, again, no stock answer. Just to give you a sense, we're going into Myanmar on our own. We have no partners, but historically when we go into new places, we find local partners. Why? They know the rules of the road better. We can provide our technology. We can provide our ethics better. And so there's no stock answer. You know, we went into, in Brazil back in the 1990s with one of the owners of the largest private bank in all of Brazil. They kind of knew how to weave your way through the tax regime, which is you need a Cray computer, I think, in Brazil to figure that out. You know, I look at Vietnam, where we built about 3 years ago. We went in a 50-50 joint venture with our Thai partner that we've been in business with since the mid-1990s. I contrast it with, we went into Serbia back in 2005. We were the largest, I love this story. We were the largest greenfield investor in Serbia of anyone in the history of Serbia, little old Ball Corporation. Well, you also forget that 5 years prior to that, NATO was bombing Belgrade because of the war that was happening there. We went in completely on our own. Why? We couldn't get comfortable with the ethics. And one of the things I've learned through all of this, and you will see it in Myanmar when you're there, is that we lead with who we are. And we've been around 135 years, and over our dead bodies, are we going to let one mistake, like the story I told in terms of the bridge builder, make one mistake, have us on the front page of the paper for the wrong reasons? Now, I'm not naive enough to say that we're perfect, because we're not. But I think it's as much about setting a tone at the top. And when we went into Serbia, it took twice as long to build than we had planned. And I can speculate as to why. I'm sure that people were saying, you know what, I can get you a permit quicker. And our folks said no. In fact, they stood at the top of the mountain and said who we are. And ethics and value is real important because what we have found out is it's a little bit like a drug. You try it once and you're forever hooked. And so don't start the first time. And so that's the philosophy we see. And hopefully you'll see it in Myanmar.
All right, final question. Do you care to speculate on what Britain is going to do in their vote next month regarding the EU?
No.
I won't ask you the implications of their decision, but what do you think the decision is going to be?
It's an interesting one. EU was created in Brussels. And I jokingly say that because the Germans are still Germans, the French are still French, and the Brits are still Brits. And they should celebrate that. What they tried to create is a fiscal unity without monetary unity, and that is not sustainable.
Or political unity.
Yeah, or political unity. Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's an issue facing them. I don't have a fight in the game, so to speak, and so I don't know. Well, I hope it stays together because we don't need less stability in the world today. I will say that.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking John Hayes.
Yeah, thank you.